Hey guys, I'm Mark and this is Holly, and today we're about 60 days away from our first frost, which means it's the perfect time to be planting peas. I'm going to be planting a couple different types of peas though. I'm going to be planting bush peas, which are going to go right here in front of me, and then I'm also going to plant some climbing peas, some sugar snap peas. They get really tall, but I got to use a different setup. I'm going to show you that in a minute for how I do those. But this is not going to be a video so much about how to plant peas. It's going to be how I'm planting my peas this year, given the situation that I have. I'm kind of using them as a tool, and you'll see what I mean by that in a second. This bed that I'm sitting in right now used to house corn. I just cut down all the corn stalks 2 days ago after I got my last final ears, my last pickings out of what was good out of the sweet corn, and Holly got the rest of what was good out of there. But now it's all cut down, and I'm going to use up this space with peas. Now, typically you're going to want to put peas about 12 to 18 inches apart between rows, okay? These corn rows are 2.5 feet apart, which is a lot wider than that. I would have liked to really ideally put a row in between here. That would put me at 15 inches between rows, but I've got these grass clippings down that I used as mulch, and it's really interlocked and interwoven, and it's just going to be a bear to kind of get in here and separate it all separate it apart in both directions enough that I can get a trench and put another line in, so that for how much space I have, I don't exactly feel like the juice is worth the squeezing. The advantage to planting your rows tight together in this case with bush variety peas is that they wind up growing up together, and they kind of use each other for support to stay up off the ground and keep the pea pods up off the ground. I'm not going to have that so much here. The extra distance between the rows means they are going to lay down a little bit more, but this grass is still pretty thick in most of the areas around here, and I think that that's going to help protect the peas from rotting off when they would otherwise come in contact with the soil. And again, these are going to be shell peas that I'm planting. I don't know if I mentioned that, but they're bush peas, they're shell peas. So I'm not going to be eating the pea pods themselves. So if the pea pods themselves get a little bit blemished by touching the ground, I'm not too worried about it because I'm going to be splitting them open and taking the individual peas out anyway. So to get started with, you can see I have what's left of the corn stalks still in the ground. I just cut them off. I'm going to leave those roots in the ground over the winter. They can just decompose and they'll be fine like that. I don't see any need to disturb the soil. I don't want to disturb the soil as much as possible. I got a good layer of mulch here. Everything's fine. I just want to keep it that way. These peas are going to act as an additional mulch too. That's one of the benefits of doing this, is that I'm constantly going to have this bed covered with something. So to start off with, what I did is I used my tool here. You saw me scratching at the ground. And that just allows me to get in between the lines and up close, nice and close to these corn plants here. If I had a longer handled something, I wouldn't be able to have the dexterity that I do with this. But once I did that, you can see I did that all along each row. Then I'm going to go ahead and plant my peas in between. Now, typically you would want to plant 20 to 25 seeds per foot, which seems like a lot for such a large seed, but it's really not. But in my case, since I've got these little interruptions here, I'm going to be doing even a little bit less than that. So I've got a pound of seed, and that's approximately 2,500 seeds. So I'm hoping that I can get, with the interruptions here, I'm hoping maybe I can get 15 seeds per foot. We'll see. Ultimately, I just want to wind up having maybe 7 or 8 rows. And then the rest of this bed, I'm going to wind up planting in with some additional bush beans, because I've got some beans going around, some bush beans going around the perimeter, right now. But they're sort of tired. I mean, they do have some flowers here and there left, and they've got some beans where they are producing here and there, but they're at the tail end of things. I think I'm just going to get one last final harvest out of these, rip them out of the ground, and then just focus on some new bush beans, since I got 60 days left, which should be plenty of time, especially if I plant this particular variety that's behind me, which is called Prevail. It's a very early bean. It's a little bit earlier than the Blue Lake. So I'll have time for that. Anyway, this is going to be my bed full of legumes. To start off with the peas, this is PLS 595, by the way, is the variety. I'm just going to take a big handful like this. Now that I've got my rows, it's not for you. It's nothing for you. Now I've got all my my rows scraped up and ready to go. It's very easy to come by and just kind of sprinkle. Well, typically it'd be easy if you didn't have an 80-pound Rottweiler here inspecting everything you do, but we make do with what we got, don't we, Holly? Don't eat them. No. Hey. These peas have not been inoculated with anything. You can do that. That helps with the little parts on the roots that fix nitrogen and the symbiotic relationship that goes on with the roots with legumes. When you inoculate, it speeds that up a little bit. It gets that whole interaction going that much faster. You do wind up having a little bit healthier plants with a little bit more productivity. But since this is an organic garden and I don't use any salt-based fertilizers at all, I'm just taking the approach of hoping that the existing microbes in my soil and the things that are already living in here will be sufficient enough to help the peas along. The beans did really well. They did fine without being inoculated, you can see. So I'm putting about 8 to 10 seeds in between each little corn stalk here. And these corn stalks are planted 9 inches apart. And as I go, I'm just covering them up a little bit. I mean, you don't have to be super particular about how deep you plant these. Peas and beans are pretty robust seeds. I mean, by nature, there's a very large kernel. It's not a kernel, but you know what I mean. It's a robust little seed that'll drive itself up through a good bit of soil. All right, watch out. And I'll make my way all the way to the end here. Well, I'll wait until I get Holly out of the picture to finish up the rest of this, but you get the general gist of it. That's what's going to wind up being here for most of this field, and then the other half on the backside behind the camera I'm going to do, and some more bush beans, but they're not going to be planted the same way. The bush beans are going to be planted about 2 seeds every 4 or 5 inches is what I do, and then I thin them down to 1 plant. So now I'll take you over and I'll just show you how I'm going to do my sugar snap peas, because that process is just a little bit different. All right, guys, now it's on to the sugar snap peas, or the climbing peas. These peas are much different than the ones I just showed you, because these guys will get 5-6 feet tall. I mean, they get huge. So you're going to want to have some kind of support to grow them on. In this case, I'm using the trellis that is made out of cattle panels that I used earlier in the season to grow my pickling cucumbers on. So I'm just going to repurpose this, and it's going to be it's time that the cucumbers got ripped out of here. So 2 months out from first frost, perfect time to repurpose it as a pea trellis. Typically, you're going to want to have your rows, in this case, 4 to 6 feet apart when it comes to these really tall varieties. Again, this is an example of something that I already have, so I'm going to make use of it. Ideally, I'd like to have something else maybe going right down the center to take full advantage of the space, but in this case, with a garden this big, I think I'm just going to stick with this and do 2 lines and just call it a day with that. But the way I'm going to do this is, again, same method as before. I'm going to take my one of my favorite little tools here. This is my Japanese weeding sickle again, and just go through. First step is just kind of rough up the soil along where I'm going to be planting these. And you can just pretend, you can see here's the cucumbers that are still left. You can just pretend, for filming's sake, that I went ahead and went all the way down. But it's always good to do one step at a time, I find. I don't like to do a little bit and then plant seeds and then do a little bit and plant seeds. I like to do the entirety of what I'm going to do with that tool and then come back and plant my seeds. It's just easier when you have 2 hands. Yeah, we don't have 4 hands like you, Holly. Wouldn't that be nice? Okay. So these are just your regular old sugar snap peas. Classic. It's another reason why you want to have these guys trellis, is not just because of their growth habit, not just because they get 5-6 feet tall, but also the fact that in this case sugar snap peas, or even like snow peas, you're eating the pods. So you want those pods to be perfect. They're green. You don't want them to touch the ground and get blemishes on them and things like that. You want them to be perfect. So when they grow up a trellis like this, they stay protected from the ground and all the creepy crawlies and stuff like that. But same deal. About 20-25 seeds per foot. Cover them up with about 1 inch of soil. let them go. I'm glad I'm getting this done today because we're about to have 3 to 4 solid days of rain ahead of us, it looks like in the forecast. So it's a great time for me to be planting seeds. Anyway, that is my video about peas and what I'm going to be doing with them this year, 2021. I hope you guys like my video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.